Okay, now that I have covered the API, our UI design, and we know what we get inside our unfinished function from end design. Okay, what is Axios, right? Now comes the part of API calling. So as I told you earlier, I'm going to use Axios to make our HTTP request. But as you can see, I am not really using Axios. I am saying Axios instance instead of Axios. So what is this Axios instance doing? So let's go to our Axios instance function inside lib. Okay, so as you can see, I am setting up a Axios instance. So before learning about Axios instance and Axios, let's explore why Axios, where we are using Axios and what is Axios. So if you go to their official documentation, it will say the same things here, that Axios is a JavaScript library used to make HTTP requests from Node.js or XML HTTP request from the browser that also support the ES6 Promise API. Okay, so this is perfect for us. And here are some important features of Axios. So Axios is simply a library to make HTTP requests, and the features they provide is make XML HTTP request from browser. Okay, you might not know what XML HTTP request is. It is also a browser API that is used to make API calls without reloading your page. That means this API is provided by the browser. It only works in browsers. It won't work in your API without the Node.js environment. And we do not use XML HTTP request anymore. We have a better API that is fetch. You must have used fetch in your projects. So it doesn't use fetch. It uses XML HTTP request under the hood to make HTTP request. And it also makes HTTP request from Node.js. That means you can use it in your backend projects. And it also supports the Promise API. Okay, great. That means you can chain it with the .then and .catch to handle your responses and your errors. And it also provides intercept request and response. So this is very important. So Axios will actually provide us middlewares that has access to our request and responses. That means before we make an API call and after we make an API call, Axios will have the access to can access our request object and our response object, and we can modify our request or responses before giving it to our .then and .sketch block. So it also automatically handles the JSON data. That means when using fetch, you had to parse the JSON data to JavaScript object before using it. You do not have to use that, do that with Axios. Axios will automatically give you JavaScript object that you can use. Okay. So after that, what are Axios interceptors, right? An Axios interceptor is a function or a middleware that allows you to intercept and modify requests or responses before they are handled by your application code. Simple. Interceptors can be used to add common functionalities like login, authentication tokens, error handling, or retry logic across all requests and responses. Okay, this is great. And request interceptor is simple. It has access to your request object in when you make an API call, and you can handle the logics in your request object. And the response interceptor, before you handle the response in your code, you can handle it in the response interceptor. Okay, simple. So let's go back to our code again. Okay, so as you can see, instead of using Axios, I am creating a Axios instance so that I can export it from this from this file, and I can use it in other files. So you can create an Axios instance with axios.create, and the benefit is you can add other properties, like you can set up the page URL, so you do not have to enter the page URL each time you make an API call. You can configure your headers. And after creating our Axios instance, so our Axios instance is created, and then we can apply some middlewares. For example, I am applying Axios instance dot interceptor dot request. I'm using the request interceptor, and inside our use function, we actually give it a callback function, which will return a promise. So inside the callback function, we have access to the config parameter. So what is this config parameter? This config parameter is the HTTP request configuration object that has access to many properties like the page URLs, the header, the authentication header. So So before each API call, this interceptor will intercept our API call, and then it will set up change our configuration object. That means we have our token. We can get the token from our cookies. Don't worry about cookies. I'm going to show you the cookies. Just understand that I am getting a token from our cookie. Okay. So if we have a token in our cookie, I am setting up the cookie in our config.headers.authorization. That means the backend now will able to get the authorization token from the configuration header, and they can verify if the user is actually authorized to access this API. Okay, great. Now we can return the config. So this config is, as I said, the HTTP request configuration object. And if we have any error, we can simply reject the promise. Okay, great. Now we have set up our Axios instance and our Axios interceptor. Now we can export this instance and use it in our code.